Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Chapman, and I'm bringing to you the podcast Remarkably You. Every fortnight, we get someone remarkable on the show, an author, an entrepreneur, a business owner, or someone who's given back to society in a big way. Today's guest is Glenda, and Glenda says that she thrives at the edges between theory and practice, order and chaos, something that we have a lot of nowadays, between past and future. And she's been in it since 1986. She's been drawing lessons from complexity science. She's got a lot of background into the physical sciences. And she's been helping people thrive in turbulent and uncertain environments. That's been her specialization. Today, more than ever, her work offers insights, options for actions, and well-being for people around the world. She's the founding executive director of the Human System Dynamics Institute. Glenda leads a global community of over, 800 scholar practitioners. They work across sectors to build adaptive capacity for individuals, teams, institutions, and communities. For more information about Glenda, of course, you can visit hsdinstitute.org. So welcome, Glenda.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
And so Glenda would like to begin by, if you could, share a little bit about HSD, and I believe it's in OD, it's in the space of OD. So what's the approach to OD that's unique about HSD? Maybe you can start there.
Thanks for that question. So human systems dynamics is particularly useful in times of uncertainty. So often organization development and leadership approaches assume that you know what's going to happen and you're preparing for it, or you know what you want to have happen or what should happen. Human systems dynamics works best in times when you don't know what will happen. You can't predict, you can't control. What you have to do is be very sensitive to the moment and make choices and then do it again. So the fact that we work in uncertainty. The second thing is that we believe that the patterns of dynamics are the same for individuals, for teams, for communities, for organizations. And so the work that we do crosses all of those different levels and talks about the interdependencies between them. So we think that a practitioner, someone who's working with a human system, has to be prepared for uncertainty and has to attend to all the different levels of human experience. And that's the soul of HSD.
I think couldn't come at a better time. Today, not too many people have the right answers. Take your choice of prime minister, of president, or scientist, all those think tanks. And so I think it's a great thing to be delving deep into the science and seeing how it works. So you spoke of the soul of HSD, and I think I've managed to experience some of this long years back. What are some of the foundational pillars or constructs that HSD stands on or uses a lot of?
When we started this work back in the late 1980s, we had many, many practices and tools that we used. Over the years, it's gotten distilled into 3 pillars that we believe are the center from which everything else emerges. So the first one is adaptive action. And that is that if you're in uncertainty and you don't know exactly what to do, you have to do something. And so you say, what am I seeing in this moment? So what are my options? Now what can I do to move forward? And then you take action. And then you see what happens and then you do it again. So it's an iterative, short cycle decision process based in questions. What, so what, and now what? So that's one really important process pillar. The second is what we call pattern language, and looking at not causality as if it were A causing B or a push and a pull kind of change, but thinking that there are relationships and parts in complex systems where there are tensions that emerge between. And how do you see and understand and influence those tensions to move forward? So it's a very different way to think about causality and possibility. And then the third, and maybe the most important one, is inquiry. Because if the world is uncertain, you don't have answers, you'd better be able to ask good questions.
Yeah.
And so we have 4 practices for inquiry. One is to turn judgment into curiosity. So rather than being stuck in my own perspective, my own expectations, my own hopes, I can step into inquiry with others and ask questions. The second is to turn conflict into shared exploration. The third is to turn defensiveness, which is very common in times of change. When things are changing, it's easy to fall into the trap of wanting to defend what you used to do and explain why it was so great then, rather than stepping into something that's more fit for function in the moment. So to turn defensiveness into self-reflection. And then the last is assumptions into questions. So those 3 things, adaptive action, thinking of patterns, standing in inquiry, are the 3 fundamental practices. And they play out differently in every time and every place. But that's the heart of HSD.
And you make it sound so simple. And, obviously it's, really deep stuff. So, and I was wanting to go a little deeper into one of them. And it's interesting that you're talking about causality. There's this nice phrase I came up with the other day, causal opacity, where we're unable to see exactly where things going to cause and the effect is no longer so simple to ascertain. And I think everybody is looking for that. This is the effect. Where's the cause? And I feel what that's leading towards is, people either oscillating between either making somebody the hero or blaming somebody or something. And obviously, if you make somebody a hero, they stay a hero for some time, but then things go wrong over there. So I see this kind of oscillation happen. That's interesting. So spotting patterns and pattern language. If we, how did you come across this whole piece, and what is this about?
Well, when I first started in my professional practice, one of the things I did was that I was a facilitator.
Okay.
And I studied other facilitators, and I read about facilitation, and I knew all the right things to do. So I would design a meeting, and we would begin. And sometimes that design, that plan, would work perfectly, and everyone would do what I expected them to do, and we would end with great harmony. That didn't happen nearly often enough. More often, either the group would decide that what I thought they wanted to do was not really what they needed to do, and they'd go off in some other direction. Or there would be some underlying tension or something going on that meant that they wouldn't come together around what I wanted them to do. They'd wander around, or they'd get in conflict. Sometimes they'd wander around all over, and 10 minutes before the end of the meeting, they'd click right into place, and we'd be where I thought we were going to be. So that dilemma about how to set conditions so that a group could get its work done, not that I could predict and control and make them do their work, but so they could get their work done. That was my challenge. And the more I thought of it as I was causing things to happen, or they were causing things to happen, or something outside was causing to happen, the more messed up I got. But when I paused and thought, what are the patterns in the room? What are the patterns for each individual person? What are the patterns in the world that this group is serving? And how can those patterns be most coherent? When that became the frame of my question, then I could find pathways forward, either in planning or in the moment. I could see when the pattern shifted. And so it became a much more useful way for me to stand in relationship to a group.
ask any trainer who's been in the game, not even very long, you know, even for a little while, and they'll tell you, you know, so that just happens
Yeah.
so often. And
And it's easy for people when they're either facilitating or as OD consultants to get into a power struggle.
yeah,
I'm the professional. I know what
mm,
should happen. This is the
correct,
path you should go.
yeah,
No, no, no. If you were just doing what you were supposed to do, it would be fine. And so it becomes then about what I expect and what they expect.
mm,
That's a totally um, not useful conversation to have. That's not the conversation between me and them. The conversation among them is the conversation that I need to be setting conditions for.
also the other, I think the other side of the uh, continuum, um, people start looking at the facilitator as the person with all the answers, or you know, wanting the facilitator's rubber stamp, or you know, validate their thoughts. And I think one of the roles of a facilitator is to, you know, let stuff emerge and let people find their own answers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's you know, it reminds me of a situation I've gotten into a few times, where you think, you know, when you spoke of, I removed, you know, what's causing it? Am I causing it? Is the group causing it? And there's this particular workshop that comes to my mind a while back. I was doing this thing on mindful leadership. I prepared it really well, got into the class. People reacted really well. I felt happy, right? Getting out. It was about a 2-3 hour kind of thing. Well, came out of there and bad feedback. People just didn't like it. Until date, I just haven't figured out why in the world that workshop didn't go too good. You know, it was a kind of a, I don't know, something really eerie about that. There was preparation. I've done it many times, similar audiences. So yeah, so there's something more going on. You know, there's something more going on. And yeah. So what is pattern logic? And you know, we speak about these sticky problems, these wicked problems. So how can pattern language or pattern logic help us with some of these you know, wicked problems, whether it's an OD or facilitation?
Oh. Well, there are some problems that are solvable problems.
Mm-hmm.
You can find a cause or a root cause. You can set things up so they'll happen. It's a problem you solved before. Evidence-based practice works. You can bring in an expert to solve it. So those are problems that are solvable. And those aren't the ones we pay attention to. There are lots of people who'll teach you to solve problems. The problems that we look at are ones that are not solvable. They're called wicked problems. And they're not solvable for a variety of reasons. One is that the boundaries are open. And so even if you frame a problem, other things come in from outside and influence it. And so you don't know really who's going to come in and come out. Sometimes we talk about having a meeting at a bus stop where people are coming in and going out. And so you can't get a handle really on a stable definition of the problem. The second thing is that there are more than one way to name success. So we find people who've been in lockdown and have been struggling to be effective. So they are parents at the same time that they're working at home, at the same time that they're caring for their parents, at the same time they're trying to take care of their own health. And so in one moment, they have all those different ways to measure what it means to be successful. And to optimize them all at the same time isn't possible. So that's the second thing. There are a lot of ways to measure success. The third thing is that things are interdependent. So it's not that A causes B, but A causes B causes A causes B causes A. So that if I'm working at home in lockdown and something happens at work that frustrates me, that's going to affect how I interact with my children. And as my children then react to that, that's going to affect me again, which is going to affect work, which is going to affect me, which is going to affect the children, which is going to affect my partner, which is going to affect, and that those kinds of relationships then make it impossible to find a root cause. So wicked problems are open. They have lots of variables, lots of ways to measure them, and they're interdependent. So in that world, all the traditional problem solving about divide it up, find a solution to the parts, put it back together, read a book, find an answer, see how it works somewhere else, none of those works. And so when we work with clients, they come to us because they're stuck. They have a problem, they don't know how to solve it, it's wicked. And so what we tell them is give up on trying to solve it. It's not solvable. Wicked issues like poverty or social justice, they'll never really be solved, but still you can make a difference. And so pattern logic is the way to see and understand and influence those wicked problems. So you can make a difference, but you can't solve them. And so pattern logic lies in that set of capacities that allow you to deal with things you don't predict or control. And we have lots of tools and models and methods to help. I know, as you say, it sounds simple, but it's not easy. And so practice, multiple tools, having a big toolkit are ways that really help make that possible.
Would it be possible to give us a little bit of an idea of a tool that you use often or you think is one of the most powerful tools or something that you could cover?
Yeah, it's a great question, Greg. One of the easiest and most powerful we call same and different. And so what you do is same and different.
Okay.
And that's kind of the easiest way to think about a pattern is what's the same in it, what's different in it. And so the tool is a T like this, just draw like that. And on one side you put the same, on the other side you put different.
Okay.
And then you brainstorm. So in this problem, what are the things that are the same and what are the things that are different? So we're currently working on a project with a health system post-COVID, and they're trying to figure out why some things worked so well in the COVID response, that there were some problems they'd been living with for years. And then under COVID, suddenly they went away and everybody could do work across silos, for example, in ways they never had before.
Really?
And now
Wow.
post-COVID, yeah, there were ways that systems optimized, not just in healthcare, but I think in other places too. Many of my clients had been wanting to get online, work at home, or get clients to get services online for 5 years. Never do it, would never happen. Then under COVID, suddenly it happened. So there were many ways in which the response to COVID uncovered capacities in systems that are very important. So in this group, trying to figure out what they want to keep from COVID times, what they wanted to get rid of, how they could fold in the lessons they'd learned, I asked them to do a same and different before COVID, during COVID, and after. How were all three of those phases the same and how were they different? And so so we made a list. So the similarities were things like the same people were involved, the patients were the same, the work that needed to do was the same, resources were constrained, they always were. So there's a whole list of ways that the world is really fundamentally as it was before. And then there was a list of differences. And one was there was a great urgency and there was great focus because we weren't trying to do 100 different things. We were treating COVID.
Yeah.
So urgency and a clear focus.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And so we didn't have to disagree about all those sideline things because there was just this. And there was a whole list of differences as well, that people were working outside their own jobs, that there was some work that just didn't get done, that nobody knew the course of the disease or how many people were going to be sick or when. It was a new ailment. And so all of those things were differences. And so they began to say then, if that's the pattern, what of that pattern do we want to keep today? How can we find such focus in non-COVID times?
In non-COVID times, yeah. Just going
in non-COVID times, how can we find the right level of urgency
Mm.
in non-COVID times.
Yeah.
We can't say everything is urgent,
Correct.
but how can we articulate urgency? And so it uncovered the pre and post COVID patterns in a way that made them actionable. So that's all it is. It's lines like this with same and different, and it helps everyone see the same phenomenon in the same way at the same time so they can take action.
Well, that's,
I know it sounds so simple.
yeah, and I think that's where the power lies in it, because it's a very simple concept that you're using to bring out some really big insights for people, and I think that's very different from a lot of consulting, where that is huge, complex models, and you have to look at things in 100 different ways. This is like simplicity, and yet not being overly reductive. So that's a nice balance over there. Thank you, Glenda.
It's part of what comes out when that adaptive action. So what that first step is, what's really going on. The second step is, so what does it mean? So what does it look like? So what are the implications? And then now what, you do something. So the understanding is not an end in itself. Sometimes with a really complex tool, by the time you get it understood, you're exhausted and can't do anything else. But if you can move quickly through that and into action and then see what learns, then action becomes learning and action.
Action becomes learning. And while you're talking about this, the inquiry, the what, the so what, now what, looking at things different, inquiring into things, I think being a learner first. You also said it is iterative. And I'm saying the way I'm also, what it's doing for me is that I feel that the way we focus on things today has or needs to change. We're often hear this whole thing of laser-like focus, or other metaphors like you can't chase two rabbits, or can't put your feet in two boats. And what I hear you say is you need to go in there, you need to inquire, you need to get into action, focus on your action, then pull back, question that. So it's like a zooming in and a quick zooming out, and getting a view of the big thing.
Yeah, so that you never really lose sight of your peripheral vision.
Yeah.
So you're seeing things on the edge, you never lose sight of that.
Yeah.
And at the same time you focus.
And
so
changing so much in today's uncertainty. Right?
Yeah. So that you're holding that broad range at the same time. It's so important to leadership to be able to do that. Because if a leader focuses on something just narrow and loses sight of everything else, they could really take on risk. Or if they have this foggy view of everything, they're also going to be risk. They have to have both of those skills at the same time.
It's like holding, both the ends of the stick, or holding two polarities and containing that together. So pattern logic, and I just want to see what's its utility and where all can we go with this. So what do you say about coaching and facilitation? Where can you use this whole pattern logic of in coaching or facilitation?
Well, we find that coaches are often doing it anyway. They're seeing what's happening with the client. They're asking questions to help dig into it. They're suggesting action. And so all different coaching models really move into that adaptive action cycle. So when we do coaching, we just do it straightforward. What do you see? So what does it mean? Now what are you going to do? Come back next week and we'll do it again. And so it's an elegant and simple way to think about coaching, regardless of what the other things are that you do in coaching.
And I'm also thinking that when you're doing this, you're also looking at the interdependencies between the two ends of the stick, so to speak, between the different polarities. And I think that's
Yeah.
also what you'd be looking for.
Well, and also zooming in to the individual's intrapersonal work and their relationships with others and how they work in a system. So helping the coachees zoom in and out and have multiple ways to think about the world that they're living in. So it's not just about their own internal landscape. It's also about how they relate to the world and what they're doing in the larger world.
So zooming in and out, it's for coaches, it's for coaches, also obviously for leaders, zooming in and out of problems and stuff like that. But what's one place where you feel a leader could use pattern logic? A big, like an 80, I'm just thinking 80-20 over here, especially while dealing with uncertainty and the time.
Yeah, so strategy is a really good place because we used to think that strategy was based on a prediction about where we want to be and what the steps are to get there. And so lots of leadership competencies used to be about planning strategy, long-term view, implementing plans. Well, in times of uncertainty like these, that's not so useful. But if they think instead about a vision or a future as a pattern they want to create, and then they realize every single thing they do today is generating that pattern or not. And so suddenly strategy, rather than being about some distant future, strategy becomes about today's decisions, today's information. And so it flips the strategic work to be much more present and relevant and less abstracted and distant from real work. So that's one of the ways that we work directly with leaders to help them use pattern logic is how do you build strategy when you don't know what's going to happen? You think about patterns.
I really wanted to ask if you can share an example of a leader that you worked with, and especially through this pattern logic, and maybe talk a little bit about the strategy piece and how they applied it.
So I'd like to tell you about a group of leaders who in a Canadian healthcare system. So it was a group that was province-wide, 50 leaders who came together to study and to learn about pattern logic and adaptive action and inquiry. And it was an 8-month program, 3 residencies. And in residency 1 and residency 2, they were practicing adaptive action. They were doing the work they needed to do. And then COVID hit between residency 2 and 3. And so each of those people, of course, we had to stop the training program, but each of them took adaptive action and inquiry and pattern logic into their COVID response. So no matter where they were in the system, they were looking for patterns and understanding them and taking action. They were communicating, they were in inquiry all the time. And so as we heard back from them, what they were finding was they could respond in an appropriate way in the moment. So one particular leader was in charge of an emergency room, and she realized that everybody was coming to her with questions, and she was saying, do this, do that, do the other thing. So she was making all these decisions, and she realized at some point that that was not going to work as there were more and more decisions to be made. So she paused and thought about the pattern of her decision making. She says, how am I making decisions? And she realized there were 4 simple rules that she was using for decision making, that was the pattern she was working on. So she wrote those, took out a marker, wrote them on a piece of paper, put them up on the wall. And then when people came to her with the questions, she'd say, and then they were then using the rules to make their own decisions, and she got out of the loop. But she was able to do that because she saw her own problem solving as a pattern. She saw the emergency room as a pattern. She saw the possibility for others doing work as patterns. And that was a solution she came to in the moment.
That's fascinating. That's a nice way of looking at decision making and also empowering others not just to take decisions, but also look at the thinking process happening behind decisions. Yeah.
Mm. And it gives individual people the freedom they need to
Mm.
work
Mm.
in the system as well.
Right. I want to ask you so many more questions, but probably I'm going to keep that for next time, you know. And but it's been great. I've learned so much stuff from you again in
Great.
the past and even on this podcast. So thank you for taking time out. And yeah, you have.
You're very welcome. And Greg, thank you for asking me. And thank you for this wonderful work you're doing in the world. I think you're bringing great value to people, and I appreciate it.
Thanks.
You're making a difference.
Thank you, Glenda. Thank you. And you have a good 4th of July.
Thank you. Good day to you too.
Good day. Bye.
Bye.